This is AndyTube, and on my Singer Model 338 that I've been restoring, I'm going to now do a test of a fashion disc stitching. And up here in the removable disc or cam area, I've taken out the standard zigzag cam and I put in one of the fashion discs, the one called crescent pattern. And I've gone to a single needle with yellow thread, white bobbin thread. My tension's about 2.5. I'm going to be using the left needle bar or needle position because I'm going to try and go a full number 4 width stitch. And on my stitch length, I'm trying to dial in over here to the satin area. So when you get up above the 20, there's a bracket behind here, and it allows you to start turning this stitch length or feed regulator knob and sliding up the bracket at a small increment, which is easier than trying to move it a little tiny amount. And you can start stitching and kind of dialing that until you get your stitch real tight. And most of these patterns do look better, in my opinion, with more of a satin stitch. So because it's a satin style stitch, I've also removed the general purpose foot from the machine, and I've installed the special purpose foot so that the satin style raised stitching will be able to slide in the groove on the bottom of that special purpose foot. So let's see if I can get a nice wide crescent here with a pretty tight stitch. That's actually looking pretty good. I'll show you here, but I'm going to try and tighten up the stitch a wee bit more. So I'm going to turn that stitch length knob a little bit more. You finally will get to a point where it's not, the feed dogs aren't pulling the fabric in at all, which would be like a 0 point. If you continued past that, you would get to the point where it's reversing the feed. So let's see if by tightening that I was able to get any closer here. So as long as you see the fabric continuing to move, that's a good sign. So let me go a little bit tighter. That's quite a bit more. Let's see what happens. What I'm going to watch for is this fabric moves at all. If the feed dogs have enough movement to pull the fabric. Wow, just barely. That's kind of, I think I overdid it a little bit. I turned it almost a full turn. I probably should have just gone for about a half more turn. But just to show you the difference, I mentioned before in my videos, I do not sew. I don't craft things, I just work on the machines. But I've seen these machines and the people who know how to use them do some incredibly beautiful stitching. So there is the crescent in a near satin stitch. See if it can still focus there. Looking between the yellow stitches, I can still see some of the green in the background. But then over here I tightened it up, and I don't see much of the green. Then at the end I think I made it too tight because it started to affect the pattern. It was sewing over itself so much. The fabric was being pulled through just tiny increments. So this stitch is a lot more raised than back here, almost double. So this was probably the desired position right about here. It's a nice tightening up. Here it's just a smidge loose. I guess it depends on what you were doing, but for me I can still see like green lines between the yellow. But it still made a nice crescent pattern like that. So let's go back in here. Maybe I'll do one more run with this, but I have to back out my stitch a little bit. It's a little too tight, and I'll try while I'm sewing to move this lever from 4, the widest, down to 3 to 2 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and see if we can get kind of a varying pattern there. Okay. Well, you can hear that machine. There's a lot going on in there with that oscillating hook and the bobbin holder jumping around and the zigzag going and the pattern followers following the cam up top. But here's how it looked. I think my satin stitch setting was a lot better. So this was the 4 width, then I got into the 3, then the 2, then the 1, then back up to 2, and back up to, whoops, so there's 1, then back up to 2, and 3, and at the end here, 4 width. Now I'm going to open that. I'm going to do a 4, but a number 2 width, but a longer stitch. I think that'll be the last one. Maybe I'll go about a 2.5 width, but I'm going to drop back down closer to a 20 stitches per inch length instead of way up at 25 or so. See how we look with that. So 2.5 width. Yep. And what we'll see is it looks kind of like a crooked zigzag. When you open that pattern up by making it longer, it really changes the look of it. So that may be desirable to you or not. There's what it. So there's what it looks like. I wish the screen on my camera was bigger. Looks like I'm getting spots in there. Maybe that's better to backlight it. And I wish I had the expertise to show you some combinations of these pattern stitches. But that's a single needle fashion disc crescent pattern sewing. Ta-da. Okay, I'm going to break here a little bit, and I'm going to put the other needle back in and get my black thread back down through here and set up for double needle fashion disc, and test that. And of course that will still be in the left and maximum width of 2.5, and with the special purpose foot. And I'm going to go back and find my my test fabric that had the other double needle stitches on it, and I will use that. So let me get that set up, and then we'll come back and we'll do double needle fashion disc stitching. Okay, as I continue with this fashion disc or pattern disc, I've gone back to a double needle. I still have the yellow black thread set up with the white bobbin thread. I'm using the sewing medium that I used before to test the double needle zigzag, and I still have that fashion disc called crescent in there, and I'd like to see how the double needle pattern looks with that. So I've width is 2, stitch width of 2, still the same tension, and I've still dialed in the more of a satin stitch. So let me just give this a try and we'll take a look at it. Now I'm going to try and dial in that satin stitch a little bit more here, just by turning the knob on the feed regulator or stitch length a little bit more. See how that goes. And one more turn just before the end here. Alright, let's see how the double needle crescent looks here. There it is, right there. If you remember this from the other video, the zigzag and straight stitch double needle, and here where I started approaching the satin. So this is the stitch width to, I'd say the stitch length is up there around 23 or 24. Here's what the back of that looks like. And see if I can get a little closer to show you the front of that. I think I'll go down to about a stitch width 1 just for the heck of it. It's probably going to flatten out that crescent somewhat, but let's give it a try just to see what it looks like. Get in here next to the other, and with my needle out of the fabric I can move the width lever. I'll make it a 1, Let's see how that looks. Yeah, it does look a little narrower. I'll keep this up, and I'm going to make the stitch a lot longer now. Get out of that satin stitch area length and come down to about, what is that? That looks like about 14. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that I'll show you here, but that flattens that crescent out so much that it just kind of looks like a narrow zigzag, not so much of the fashion pattern here. So this is where I went with the number 1 width, still in the closer satin style stitching. Then I opened it up to about 14, and you can see there's a very, very slight wave. So most of the fashion patterns look so much better with a closer stitch, satin style stitching, to really show the shape and so forth. But that's a couple of runs with a double needle with the fashion disc, and you know you're limited to that maximum 2.5 width, so you're not going to see the pattern as much as you would with a single needle. But let me go to 2.5 here and check to make sure I don't hit my foot pedal. Okay, because I still have the needle bar in the left position, and I'm going to go back up more into that satin area and run this at where this one was the number 2 width, and this was number 1. I'm going to try and go the max here to a 2.5 width. Tighten up that stitch just a little bit more if I can. Alright, because these patterns, in my opinion, they really look good if the stitch is so tight that you can't see the underlying fabric color through the stitch. So let me get this up here. So there was 2 width, 1 width, and now 2.5. It's good. It's an interesting pattern. You can see right into here where I went a little bit closer, more even, and I think this would go closer still, and especially if I was using twin size 11 needles. But you could see using a different size needle and thread could change this pattern quite a bit, and of course different colors and so forth. And I've seen edging done with this pattern, and then the fabric flipped and the matching pattern on the other side with a third pattern down the middle, and all kinds of possibilities. But you know, for you crafters who are into these kind of things, this machine has a lot of possibilities for you, as you can see. So that's going to be the end of the fashion disc stitching test with the crescent fashion disc and the special purpose foot, so that we can get the foot can pass over this raised up style of stitching. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you'll come back to see I got a couple more videos I think I want to do with the 338. Take care. Thanks for watching.